Hello, cousins. Welcome to Sass, our Sass Mass, our spirituality and support symposium. Think morning witchy chats around a warm campfire. The recording has started, and by participating in Sass, you agree to read and accept the terms of engagement, which I will post in the chat. We ask that you mute during the recording for clarity during the meeting and for the afterplay. We're going to get started now with a few announcements, and I'm going to hand it off to Jen Marie.
So, as you guys can tell, Maria isn't here this morning. Maria usually gives the announcements. Um, and she didn't give me a list. So, I am fully, what is it, shooting from the hip? Is that the word? Okay. Yeah. My mama can actually do that, by the way. Total side quest, guys, but it's this like story that my mama or my dad fell in love with my mama when he took her skeet shooting. Okay, we're from Texas in the back hills of Arkansas and Tennessee, so context. And she had perfect aim with the shotgun at her hip. So anyway, my mom's a super ninja. Back to what we were talking about. What's met my mama. Um, so announcements. I know that you guys have heard us kind of hinting about this super secret project that the support team is working on for everyone. And we keep going back and forth on like how much information we're going to share with you guys before it actually is like a thing, right? Our resistance is when there's a lot of moving parts, and we just like share it with the community as these moving parts are happening. Oftentimes people feel like things are shifting and changing a lot as they're forming. And so it's kind of like a protection thing to keep things kind of like running smoothly. But there is a super secret project that is going to be a like massive game changer for all of us. And so there, that's an announcement. So stay tuned. Uh the other thing is on I think we just posted a workshop at the end of April that I'm going to be doing on familiars and how to cultivate a relationship, or how a witch cultivates a relationship or can cultivate a relationship with their like animal companion or their familiar. Since Stella's having her puppies next week, it's in the air and we're talking about it a lot. It's a big part of kind of, you guys are going to be super involved with it because I'll probably be going live from the whelping box. Because I tend to stay with Stella pretty much all of the time when she has her pups. So yeah, that's at the end of April, and you guys will be able to see puppies. And yeah, trying to think of anything else. We are about to post, if it hasn't already been posted, we're going to be doing a, for those of you that went to Rituals and Revelry, the spring edition, we're going to do a summer edition that we are calling Midnight Sun because it'll be in Alaska. So very similar setup that what we did with Rituals and Revelry. So it's a curated weekend event for you guys. But we're also going to be live streaming, taking you on a hike in Alaska with us. Um, and you guys will be able to kind of get the feeling of a sun that never sets. It's a very magical thing. And yeah, so if the tickets aren't live yet, they are going to be by the end of the week. Also, the autumnal convergence, those tickets are live. But the attendance takes two different things. It's the ticket that gets you the weekend as well as your food. So it pays for the food over the whole weekend. And let's talk about the food for a moment because it is prepared by Kim, Kitchen Witch, but she grows a lot of the food that we eat at the convergence. So everything is handmade. A lot of it is like homegrown, but that's just one aspect of it. So the other aspect is the lodging. And the lodging, you get to choose between like different options. And that's why we don't bring it into and incorporate it into that ticket price. So the actual tickets are available now. And by purchasing those, it gives us a better idea of how many houses we need to uh, like reserve so that we can get everybody there. And so, yeah, we're already at the point that we need multiple houses. And what we are needing to know from you guys is how much like interest is there. And have we've chosen a location, like a main location, haven't we, Wit? So those of you that went to the convergence last year, we're going to be doing the same place that we had before as the main house. And it is right on the river. The views are amazing and it's really, really forested. And again, amazing, amazing spot. So we're excited to be able to do that again. Go ahead, Whit.
I was like, can I jump in now too?
Do it. Do the thing.
And for those of you who were there last year, we will be doing the ritual slightly different as well too. It will not be quite the hike. We'll be making it more accessible. That was quite the adventure we had, but it'll be more, yes, way more accessible for everyone. So, um, but yeah, we went back and forth, and the benefits of knowing the location that we're going to and being familiar with it um, just helps us, kind of cultivate some more layers. And uh,
Mhm.
I'm really super stoked about it. I think going back to the same place is going to be so cool. Okay, that's all I
So
want to.
for those of you that don't know Whit, Whit is our event coordinator at the Resource Center. So all of the like rituals and revelry and the convergences and all that, Whit uh is a massive Whit contributes and is like the behind the scenes person that coordinates witches. And that takes a degree in like what is it? A degree that Wit has in order to do that because coordinating witches is like herding cats. Fiercely independent and like really, really hard to get all in the same place at the same time. And she does a really good job. It will be Portland that you're going to be flying into. And we are going to be looking at different options for transport out to the location. We're looking into getting like a bus or a big van or something like that, so that that's not as much of an issue as it was last year. So there, because the location's what, like a little over an hour from the airport of driving time. So it's up in the mountains. All right. That's all the announcements. That's a lot. 15 minutes of announcements, guys. Jeez. We got a lot. And yeah, we got a lot going on. So, how about that full moon energy? How about that eclipse in Aries? How's that going for you guys? I giggle. I laugh. I laugh. So now for how many of you is this your first time going to Sass? Okay. So how this works is I'm just starting the flow of conversation. And if anyone at any point is like, hey, I'm going to jump on my own soapbox and let's talk about this, you can do that at any time, whether it has anything to do with what I'm talking about or not. It doesn't matter. We can change subjects too. This is a very like intuitive and flowing conversation that happens. And it's awesome. And there's so much like awkward silence where we like stare into each other's picture. But yes, spring is coming to Alaska, guys. I should say that very quietly. It's very taboo to talk about spring in Alaska. It's funny, but it's true. It's so true. No one will talk about it because spring is so short, and spring is like this magical fairy that comes and like blesses us all with some reprieve from the frozen ice scape that we've been experiencing for the last 8 months. Hi, Ocean.
Hello. I would like to talk about the eclipse, if that's
Yeah.
okay, because it's a Libra eclipse tomorrow in Pisces season, and those are like the biggest proponents of love, like in archetype sense. Um, that like in astrology, like they're um yeah, they're like signs that are big what am I trying to say? um so yeah, the eclipse on a full moon in Libra in Pisces season, I am actually planning a ritual to call in support that is feeling super aligned for me for this full moon. uh the full moon definitely has me kind of antsy. Like I was talking my card draw this morning, and the blanket fort was uh like I can't get the image out of my head of like my shadow card was like a person standing on a beach with like three beacons kind of lit going like out to sea. Like one of them was on shore, one of them was a little ways out, and one of them was like super far out. And it feels like I'm standing on that shore, like waiting for like, like a ship to pull in, or something. Like there's something on the ship for me, or there's something like coming in from the sea, like about to wash to shore. um and it's got me so antsy of like I bought a reading from somebody that I really like that I follow on TikTok. And because they were live and doing readings, and I was just like, I was vibing with this person like so much. Like I was like thinking about it. I was like, I don't know, I might. And then we ended up having, not only was she sitting there like reading a bunch of people about their astrological signs and like asking everybody what their signs were. I was like, oh, that's so fun. Like she was just so funny about it. It wasn't like, like mean reading or anything like that. But she told us hers, and her big three are the same as mine, but in like a different order. And it was so funny. She was like, she gave me such a good reading, but she also took on my energy at the same time, like while she was like reading for me, because like when you channel, you do that. Um, and like the reading was so great, but it was also so validating in a way that was like so deeply like tragic in a way. Like it's like the best way to put it. Like it was validating of all the things that I've been through and how much it's affected me. And like I've been giving myself permission to like feel it. And I think that's why like she was like feeling it when she was reading for me. But what I really liked that she did that I haven't seen anybody else really do, is she, at the end, she was like, okay, now I need us to separate. Like we need to separate back. And she called it calling back her energy and me calling back my energy. And I wasn't really sure about that sort of like phrasing on it, but she asked me to take like three deep breaths and imagine me drawing my like energy back in. And it was such a good idea, because sometimes when I'm doing readings or I'm interacting with a bunch of people, especially at the convergence, I feel like I'm like bits and pieces of everybody around me, and it gets really overwhelming. And that's why I spend a lot of time outside by the water, uh, in order to kind of like bring myself back to ocean essentially. And it really did feel like drawing the tide back in. I was like, wow, how did I never think of like doing that? And I like how she described it. She was like, it's like sticky hands, like those sticky hands that you stick to a wall and you just gotta like unstick it, you know? um yeah, so I learned something new. I don't know how this starts a conversation, but super excited for the full moon and eclipse season. It's supposed to be a banger for me according to my guides, so let's go. Go ahead, Jen.
I did the thing. Hold on, let me lower my hand or I will forget. What I'm doing for the full moon, surprise, it has to do with puppies. I am cleaning out and transitioning my garage space for the puppies and preparing that whole space because Stella gets a whole suite to herself. And the puppies. So no, Baxter can't go in there, Rufio can't go in there, so she gets the privacy and everything. But it takes like moving we have tractors and cars and motorcycles and all that in there. So we got to move all that out. And I'm starting that today, which is super appropriate for a full moon, like cleaning things out, letting things go, so that we can welcome new energy in. Does that make sense? So that's what I'm gonna do. And it's out of necessity because Stella's over it. She's so over it. She's a lot bigger than she's ever been when she's pregnant, and her tolerance for bullshit is zero. And Rufio and Baxter, bullshit is their middle name. So it's not super tranquil in my home right now until Stella gets her own space. So there's that. Uh, and see.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Renee.
If you're talking, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm on my phone and I have to go to like three different screens to get to change anything. So I have something I've been thinking about that I have questions about. And when everyone here talks about their guides, they seem to have, you know, entities, spirits that they're like in direct communication with almost conversationally. And I don't have that. I don't have that. Think I've talked about it before. I have a lot of chatter that just goes on in my head, but it's not related to me or directed at me. It's just overhearing other snippets of conversation more than anything else. And so I was wondering if I could create my own guide. I know there's tulpas and egregores, and I don't know if that's, I mean, if I'm like at a space where I should even consider doing something like that. But uh, I've always heard people talk about their guides, and I don't, I don't have that in the same way. So I'm just curious if people would share what their experiences are like. And um, so I guess that's sort of a question, but also just sort of what is on my mind right now. And I think, are there weigh-ins going on here? With Wit was first, and so I'm gonna turn it over to Wit.
Renee, that is such a valid feeling and so valid. I don't see my guides as like entities or necessarily like separate energies. And I was the same way as you for the longest time. I was like, I don't know my guides, and I need like these guides that I feel are they should be this certain way. And it took me a long time to realize that I see my system, it's more of a guidance system. So I think of it's like a navigation system or a atlas or something that is more of um there to guide me. And it's not this like fully separate, like, I have this guide who comes and talks to me or gives me feelings or anything. It is my system working together that is guiding me on what I should do. So when I say like my guides are talking to me, like I use that because that is like the easiest way of explaining it to other witches. But I don't have like multiple separate entities that I feel, and uses that guided system. It is just a following my intuition and listening to like my system. And might that change later on? Maybe, but it took me the longest time to like accept that. And I mean, you started talking about it and I raised my hand instantly because I know that feeling of like, I'm doing something wrong. And should I make this or should I do that or should I reach out to that? But you're valid with where you are in your practice right now.
Thank you, Whit.
And it's valid to not be like, ooh, I'm working with this entity or that entity or this or there. So yeah, it's just realizing that it's like it's how you're like I see it as my body and my my mind's way of interpreting how my energetic body, my physical body, and my mind are all working together to guide me back to who I am, who I'm supposed to be. So you are 100% valid with where you are.
Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful. That was really great, Whit.
All right. Jean Marie, the screen is yours.
So yes, I think it's important that be pointed out, that not all witches experience their guides or guidance system, which is why I say that all the time. I don't say spirit guides all the time because I think it's important that we acknowledge and validate those that experience this aspect of our human experience the same. We all experience it a little bit differently. And oftentimes, the way that we experience this, like, part of our lived experience is dependent on your giftings, right? Someone who is clairvoyant might see actual like entities and be able to, or to have that kind of relationship. Someone who is clairsentient will probably just like feel them or feel this differently, right? The way that I experience this is it's almost like these frequencies that equal personalities. So it's almost like there are different personalities or flavors that influence my like experience in some way. And that's also how I experience other people's like system of that. And the easiest way to describe this to like most witches is talking about their guides. But my actual experience of it is this like uh very clear personality that comes through in some way. And sometimes it's like, because I'm claircognizant as well, sometimes there's this like communication that happens. And also, to answer your question, Renee, about can I do this intentionally? Yes, you can. Absolutely. You can, though I would suggest that you uh look into your shadow work regarding your relationship with your guides. Where do you doubt it? Why do you doubt that they're here? Like all of that kind of thing. And so that you can connect with like who or what is there before you decide what is best for you, because you
That
don't have all
that
the information.
that makes me just want to say, you know me so well, because that's exactly what I would do.
Right. we're all obsessed with control, and we all think that we know what's best as far as like planning ahead. I know what I need, but we're wrong all the fucking time. That's why our guides are there in the first place, to give us those like nudgings and stuff. And when you have someone who's like, you know, has that relationship with control, because we often do, we're like, oh, I need a guide that is like this personality. And yes, you could totally create that. But when you focus on what you have created and not focus on what is there, you're potentially missing out on something like really cool that you set up before you even got here, right?
Well, I am so glad that I brought this up, Jen Marie, because that is exactly what I would have done.
I know.
I know you know.
Your guides just said it, right? This is what she's going to do as soon as we hang up this call. The list is going to come out. And what I'm getting is like almost personalities from TV shows or movies or stories, and how you like put
Oh,
that together.
stories.
Yeah.
Definitely stories. Well, I mean, I guess tropes almost, you know.
Yeah. It's like I'm going to create a guide that is just like what I can't pronounce it. I don't know why it came into my head. Not Inigo Montoya. That's not the right. Yeah. I'm going to have a guide just like this, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like the Scooby Gang.
Right, right. So yeah, it's a fascinating subject, but we're not supposed to experience this the same. So, all right. Ocean.
Hi. I love this subject, Renee. I love that you brought up tulpas, in specific, because it reminded me of like I knew somebody who was trying to create a tulpa um when I was much younger. Like we were working at a haunted house together, and I remember my friend brought a dice, like a 20-sided die, and he started treating it like it was like, sentient and stuff, and he told me he was trying to create his own tulpa, and that idea always stuck with me. I think that was like one of my like first little inklings of like animism, almost, in a way. But it's a little bit different because you're trying to make it be something rather than like understanding the nature of that thing. But I think tulpas are a cool subject. And I also wanted to say that, um, like in that same vein, when you try to, uh, I feel like you just said this, Jen Marie, but I was gonna say also that like when you try to make something into something, you're not actually getting to know it. But to extend upon that, um, when you get to know yourself better, you get to know your guides better. When you get to know your magic better, your guides are gonna come through. Because I was also stuck on that for a long time. I was like, everybody keeps talking about these guides, and I'm just feeling spiritually lonely. Like my guides, like I want that spiritual companionship that I feel like is like has my back. And I kind of had to bring the energy to the table of I have my own back. And my guides were like, and look, we're here too. Like they've been showing up like more and more in like small ways. Sometimes it feels like when interact with a person unexpectedly, sometimes it feels like it's a guide like crossing my path. Um, I also hear chatter. I don't always necessarily see like faces or hear voices. Um, I mean, I do sometimes, but there are other times that I just have this overwhelming energy of a giant crowd cheering me on. And I've recognized that energy as as like my guides collectively, or my ancestors, or it kind of just feels like an amalgamation of them. But it's uh, for me, it was a process of getting to know my magic and validating my magic and my intuition that like opened up this, like continued the opening of the stream, because I know you're already super witchy and doing like a lot of cool things, and I feel like you probably know yourself really well. um but I also get wanting that like perfect spiritual companionship. Um, and I feel like I want to reassure you that it does exist. It absolutely does.
Thank you, Ocean. Yes. Yes, I do. I want like a little friend, like a little magic friend besides my Phineas.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I so get that. I am gonna go ahead and pass it off to Ezra next.
This is a really cool conversation. I really like this. Let's see. One of the things that came up for me was that like if you're hearing a lot of communication like in conversations about like from witches talking about the conversations they're having with their guides, it's probably because like like part of it anyway is that like that in itself is like telling you that those are like communication which is like that talk and conversation, like they're telling you about that. And so like I experience like conversations and like dialogues a lot of the time, not all the time, but that's how my brain works. All, you know, like um I've even been reading this book called Gemini Witch because I'm a Gemini, and that is like very in tune with my the structure of my magic. Um, and so it makes a lot of sense that other people's the structure would be different. And I'd also what came up when you were saying that you kind of like listen in on conversations, it feels like. Um, I'd be interested to like, I mean, obviously this is all happening in your system, so I can't be there, but it's like there's I like it feels like I want to be at the fly on the wall in somebody's brain sometimes. To like if you have tried to join in before, like sometimes I get the feeling that uh my guides are just kind of like going about their business, like waiting for me to show up. Like, and I've gotten the feeling before, like when I started participating, that it was just like, oh, okay, cool, yeah. Like, it's like we were waiting for you type of thing to be ready to interact in that way.
That
Um,
that's so funny you mentioned that, Ezra, because actually when I was in New Orleans and I had a reading, we were kind of talking about the chatter, and Juliet, the woman that gave me the reading, she suggested, well, she was taught to, if there was like a little thread of conversation, to try to focus on the one conversation, follow it and see.
mhm.
And I've also thought about I should just write down sometime. I will do that for you, Ezra. I will write down the weird like
I
snippets of
want to know.
conversation, and you can see how completely random and boring they are. Like that's the other thing. It's so mundane everyday life. It is completely boring, but I'm gonna hop off now. But thank you.
Sometimes I will like be walking down the street or I'll enter a room or something like that. And I'll just like catch like a few lines of somebody like as I'm walking past, and something they said will feel like I walked in the room at that moment to hear them say that. Like even if it was just like a sentence. So even if it's like a mundane thing, like one time I went to the library with my baby cousins, and like as I walked in the room, there was like a librarian giving a class to kids about about like the chemical table, or the table of elements, and she specifically was talking about like silver and steel and like a bunch of things that are very that were very topical in my practice. Um, and so yeah, that just came up for me. So I think that's really cool, and I'd be interested to know. I'd never heard of tulpas before, but I do it, so that happens a lot. But I really like that, having that word in my repertoire now, because I really believe in that. That when you one of my things my guides started giving me over and over was like focus. And like with my I have very bad vision, and when I take them off, like my glasses off, it feels like everything kind of hones in and it becomes more magical. Like my glasses feel like an interface that I interact with the mundane world through. And so I kept on getting focus. And I think that there are like threads that that already exist. And then once you start participating in it, they kind of narrow in. And then that narrowed in energy become like, for me anyway, it becomes that like a frequency of personality that Jen Marie was talking about, because that's how I experienced it too, is that it like becomes a frequency that's so clear that it's like a character or an archetype in and of itself. So I think Stephanie was next, but I can't see the orders.
Yeah, I think so. Man, I'm loving all of this so much. I'm so glad that you brought this up. I really connected too with what Jen Marie said about how it seems it can go align with our giftings, right? Because I've had, conversations since, I mean, forever, right? Like I don't remember not just walking around having conversations with when I'm alone, if you will. And so that is how I realized that that's been presenting itself to me my whole life, and I didn't necessarily put a name to it, if you will. It was just came naturally to me. But I started doing um, a lot of more deeper meditation work to try and connect with my guides, and I really did get to know them better that way. And they do present themselves as a team of different appearing and different behaving factors. And in one of my meditations, I asked, why do you appear this way? Because this particular one is, it's silly, right? Like it's a silly way to appear to me. And my answer was it was because that way I could understand it in that moment. Like that's where I was in this journey, and that appearance would help me understand more about who they were, because they almost laughed and said, this is not how this is truly at all, but this is what you will understand in this moment where in your journey. So that's why they appeared to me that way. And I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense. It did to me, but that's why I think each different I love that generally frequency appears a different way, because it helps me almost differentiate that archetype sort of guidance in that moment and give almost a face to the voices, because that's just how I will personally understand it. So it makes sense that it would be different for everyone. So that's just my experience. I think, Caroline, you are next.
Thank you, Stephanie. I enjoy this conversation, and I didn't think I would have much to add, but I kept getting poked to just let the people who are out there that feel like they don't have the same experience with guides that you see on TikTok, where, oh, my guide is a dragon and this guide is an angel and this guide is a and these are their names and stuff like that. And even one of the things I was told a lot at first was about synchronicities or syncs. And everybody was, oh, this is my sync, this is my sync. And I couldn't find my sync, and I still haven't found my sync. But and they were even like, oh, just make up one and say you want to see like blue butterflies when you're on the right track or whatever. I never get them. I never get them. It doesn't happen. It once in a while, but it takes time. Like, and I think it took me 2 years to really start connecting well with them, because I had to learn to trust myself and, like they said, get to know myself, but be patient with it. Learn your own voice. You'll get there. And if you have to use the tarot cards, or you have to use the pendulums or the dowsing rods, Nothing wrong with that either. So because they connect to me easiest through those because I'll trust that easier than I will an idea that pops into my head. Which I'm working on and I'm getting better at, but we're there. And go ahead, Maya. I rambling now.
Thanks. I kind of piggybacking off of what you just said and what a lot of people have just said. Right before Sass, I planned on being here, but I forgot and was like in a mess of craziness. And I was on a phone call with a friend of mine for like an hour and a half, and it was dragging on. And all of a sudden, the call dropped 2 minutes before Sass started. And I was like, my guides are looking out for me. I'm supposed to be here for a reason. I think this conversation is a synchronicity, if you will, that I need to be here for this specific conversation and other ones that we may have today. So that's my little 2 cents. Go. I don't know who's next. I can see, but
Let Mumble Fairy go first. I think I technically have my hand up first, but I want to hear Mumble Fairy first.
Hey y'all. So mine was more of a question, kind of Wayne. I just because it's along the same lines, so I really appreciate that this came up because it's definitely something that I have thought about too. And because for me, I kind of felt the same way as Renee, but hearing everyone talk about it, especially with the frequencies, there have been a lot of times in my life when I've been in conversations with people, and this also relates to what Ezra was saying. We're kind of like coming in at the right time, but where I have, I guess, started to talk about something and said things that I think in that moment the people I was talking to really needed to hear. And like it was just, and so, and I'm still working on trusting my intuition and trusting like, is this one of those moments or is this just like I just wanted to talk? I'm a chatty person. And but do you think it's possible that that is kind of the way my guides might present? And if so, what would be your recommendations for um learning to better tap into that and kind of like, understand that that's the way my guides might present and how would I connect with them and, learn to hone that in, I suppose. Go ahead, Ezra.
Let's see. I want to answer that question first, and then I had something else because I was going to try to do it in order for some reason, and now I'm like, okay, so the only thing I really have for that is like pay attention. Like that, like that's like when I started when I started, thinking about everything as magical potentially if I wanted to be, like I started, like looking around and opening my eyes and like especially for my ears actually that became a big thing for me is that like I'm a very auditory person as well as a visual person, but in our society we really like there's I read a whole like article once about like vision supremacy in our culture and like the idea of like a picture is worth 1,000 words and believe half of what you see and none of what you hear, and like this idea that your eyes can be trusted a little but your ears can't be trusted at all. And so once I started like thinking about it in that way and I started to open myself up to getting messages that were not in a form that I was expecting. And that kind of leads me to my other point. Like, I don't know if that helps at all. But I recently started like talking to my guitar and realizing that like the way that I've been learning for almost a year now, like how to play it, and it's the first instrument I've ever played, and everything about how I was like every video, every like the person, like the store that I bought it from, which is like a very cool place, like a co-op, and they had like a lot of knowledge, but everything about it was like all about learning to play a guitar in the way that we've always been playing guitars. Like I even asked about like a left-handed guitar because I'm ambidextrous, and I was wondering if that was, a thing I should look into. And my partner's learning with me, and she's left-handed. And the guy was just like, if you can possibly learn with right-handed, do it that way. And even just that is like, that's just so weird that we just like there's a way, there's like a correct posture to hold the guitar in, and there is a correct way to play the notes, and even the notes, like the what is it, like the 12 like main notes that there are, or I don't know, chords, I can't remember, but they like that's not all the notes that exist. Those are the notes that like somebody a long time ago decided sounded right altogether. And like and so I've just like been experimenting with like holding my guitar very differently, and like you could hold it upside down if you wanted to, like you could hold it like a cello. Like I was been like laying down with it, and like kind of just like laying it like fully on top of my body, and like yeah, there are alternate tunings. And I also have been just kind of experimenting with the reason this came up is because it feels like I'm having like an actual conversation with my guitar and the music that it wants to play. Like, what does the music want to be and want to sound like? And also, in order to play guitar better, I finally have committed to stop biting my nails. And I'm a lifelong nail biter, like to the quick, like shorter than every nail biter I've ever met, really. Like it's like it's not a casual picking thing. Like and so I realized that like my fingers want to pick. And so now I have stopped doing that, and it feels like almost my fingers, that like having my fingers in my mouth was like attempting to keep them from moving the way they want to move. And so I've been experimenting with just like letting my fingers move the way they want to move, and then putting a guitar string near them and seeing what comes out of that. And then it feels like my body and the guitar are saying something to me. And in the same way that like something like 60% of communication is like body language or tonal, like it's not the actual words. It's probably more than that, but that's what science says it is. And so and so things that like if you kind of like if someone grunts like really short, and then like you kind of can tell, even though they said nothing, just by that note that they're ambiguous or not really interested or something like that. And if someone has higher pitch, like if you go higher at the end of a sentence, it's more like a question. And so once I started listening for that, it feels like there are things that the music is saying, like as if this is, as if it's speaking without words. And I was talking to my mom while I was playing around with it, and she said something that was, we were talking about like traumas and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden she said something that was like very, sad, or like just like it made me angry that happened essentially. And all of a sudden my nail like hit a string, and it was just like a very angry note, like it hurt my ears. And before that point, it was pretty like, just like easygoing and, kind of like tapping along. And yeah, it just felt like the guitar was contributing to the conversation with that angry note. And I think that's just the reason I went on this rant, is that is a way my eyes have been opening about the paying attention in ways that you wouldn't expect. And what Caroline mentioned about like creating syncs in that way, like that's why, that can work for some people. It's just sometimes it's not as straightforward as you think. Like, and I think that as you start listening, like there's going to be a period probably where you don't think you're getting anything. And it's kind of just like a learning curve situation. Because I feel like I keep on feeling like, oh, okay, I get it. And then a new thing happens, and there's a new way that the world is communicating with me through, either syncs or conversation I'm hearing as I pass by, or through music. I get a lot of music syncs. I think Caroline does too, like, musical wise. So like, one time just last night, I suddenly out of nowhere hummed the like, "You've Got Mail" thing. Like, and I was like, oh, I must have gotten a message and not realized it, because all of a sudden I just hummed out of nowhere. And I was like, why did I suddenly get that? And so then I was just like looking around for what just happened. Like, what did I miss? So it probably will present differently for, for other people, but that's how it's been presenting for me. So thank you. I'm not sure if it was Whit or Maria, so you guys battle it out.
Whit can go because my boyfriend's changing laundry and I'm overstimulated until the noise stops. So go ahead.
More than happy to help out, Maria. Mumble Fairy, to your question of sorry, my brain kind of lost it a little bit in just getting lost in Ezra's like conversation there, and it was so cool. But I'm gonna catch back onto it. There's still a thread there, so I'm gonna keep talking and it's gonna come. What to kind of help you like hone in or realize it or feel into it, or look into that, you're doing it. What you're doing in foundations is how you kind of do that, and how to, like Ezra's point of, paying attention. It's working through your shadow work. It's working through your deconstructing of what you have thought is real and how the world works, and realizing that there is a different way, and that you can start seeing these things differently. And there's years and years and years and years of conditioning that we have from growing up in the society and the way that we grow up. And so working through it and taking each of those prompts and that we have monthly is to help lead you through some of those bigger topics. And then as you are doing more and more shadow work, there's more and more shadows that pop up. There's always more shadows. But they're popping up for a reason. And anytime, my opinion is anytime that you work through that and you realize that shadow and you look at your conditioning and you work on that deconstruction, you're getting a step closer, a little bit closer to remembering or being able to be more in touch with whatever it is that you believe in or that you're feeling, or connecting with your guides. And so it takes time, but you're already starting that work now. And you're going to go through periods of where you're feeling really connected and you're feeling real good. And then you're going to go 2 times where it's like, why am I not connected anymore? You know, I've had times where I'm like, okay, imposter syndrome. I'm not feeling nothing right now. This is not, clearly, I'm just making this all up, but it's sticking with it and realizing that sometimes we need that downtime from our guides and our, um, input from others that, for our systems to kind of recalibrate and to be in that spot to where you can then be resting and rejuvenating, and then all of a sudden you've got this bunch of influx of information coming at you, um so you are doing it. Congratulations, you're here, you're doing the work. All right, I think that was all that I had in my brain to get out. So Maria.
Well, it's interesting that my nervous system just got flustered. Because I'll start with that. So on a little bit what Mumble Fairy too was saying, pinged something for me about so everything that I'm about to say also is kind of generally about taking like your own data on how you like experience things. So just like with that, whatever I'm about to say. And we are first, so first thing, there's like a lot out there, and there's a lot of information out there about like, this is how you meditate, this is how you connect with your guides, this is how you work with the deity. That's how some people do it. That's an option for you to try, right? But it's not the way. The way that you do it is whatever way you do it. And I think that like the shadow work process is great because you learn connection with yourself and a little bit about discernment about when you hear an option, this is how you do it, to kind of really have that ping for yourself that like, oh, this feels in alignment with my system, because with your clairs, your giftings, and you all have them, and you all have guides, and your guides are talk to you all the time. Um, and it's not that you can't hear it, it's just kind of like tuning into your language with them. And that may be different for you. Like you may, people mention like smelling, hearing, tasting, you know, and those are just like the general, like there's such a wide range of ways. And like what Carolyn said, like I kind of came in shortly before that, but like the blue butterfly. Well, I'm waiting for the day that her guides and the universe are orchestrating this blue butterfly, and you're just going to drive up like the hill one day and there's going to be like a gigantic, right, blue butterfly. But it's like you called out something very specific. And so sometimes we have to allow time when we're that specific to allow the orchestration of things and sequences, right? Like I love the quote from A Wrinkle in Time. Miss Witch says, and I looked it up on my phone just so I could say it correctly. Like, do you realize how many events and choices that had to occur since the birth of the universe, leading to the making of you just exactly the way you are? And it like reminded me of that about syncs too, or signs. When we ask for something so specific, like you got to let that work, like the universe do its thing to like show up, for you. Like if you ask for something a little bit more like, wit's got feathers, like the feathers are kind of, available. And so easier to have that show up, right? To have that opportunity to meet. But it's also about like how you feel when it happens. And so this kind of this is where maybe some people call it faith, or some people call it whatever you want, right? But it's that interconnection that connects us with spirit, the other things, the unseen. Like I think of like to like the high priestess kind of, right? Like that seen to the unseen. When you get the sync, there's a choice point that happens. Do you believe it is or not? You know, so there's that element of it too. And sometimes it has to maybe show up in enough of a pattern because it can show up for you and you can choose not to believe it as a sign. So there's that part of engaging, I think too, like this, and a lot of this is from my journey, you know, with it. And I also say like, I have the reserve the right to change my perspective anytime because as I take in new information, new data, sometimes it shifts. But doing kind of that connection with self, and it's like it really is kind of connecting with yourself sometimes. And I channel a lot. And sometimes it's just like higher self information. Sometimes it might be, you know, guides and sometimes maybe deities or whatever. Sometimes it might just be picking up energies from other people or whatever. With consent, of course. You know, I mean, sometimes it happens just because I'm just walking by someone and it happens, but you know, I don't read into it, you know, further unless we're in that engagement. But you know, and so it's like kind of feeling into it and kind of that engagement with yourself where you can kind of then pick up on potentially like how it feels for you inside your body and energy signatures. And so the it is like muscle, like when you go to the gym and you work out and you develop muscle memory with anything that you do, you know, you kind of like develop, even like with yarn, right, with like crocheting, you develop that muscle memory where you just pick up the yarn and your hands just kind of start doing the thing without really putting a lot of thought into it. That's been my process with like connecting. So if I was engaging in doing readings for other people, whether it be tarot or mediumship, and I have so what just happened with the thing. I felt like I was kind of connecting, maybe starting to receive some information, and then like the laundry happened and my system went like totally frazzled. So when I'm in that heightened state, when my nervous system is super engaged in that way, it's not that my guides aren't there supporting me. It's just that I might not be able to hear because my body is experiencing like a catalyst, maybe telling me that I need to run away from the saber-toothed tiger when I don't, right? Like an inappropriate response that way. Like I got very overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed with the background noise. If I'm trying to talk, I just do. So it's just like how I engage my process and how I engage with that when that response happens to me. But it was interesting because that's not the time when my nervous system is engaged in that heightened that I'm probably going to be able to hear or like receive those types of messages. It's not that I'm not being supported in that moment. It's just that my nervous system is engaged. And so I need to, there's the process that my body is calling for something else in that moment, you know? So meanwhile, the other side of it. So, you know, working with a practice, whatever that practice wants to be to you, even if it's just sorting out how your system uniquely connects to your guides, energies, past loved ones, whatever it is that you're looking to do. You know, my process has just been like very repetitive over the last 20 years where I do this specific thing. So my body and my mind and my knows what that means. Like, oh, okay, like this is a space where I'm open for communication and that I maybe will like receive longer messages or like connect because I've given it's so and it's almost like I've made a phone call. Like I've called it in. Like, hi, like you want to talk right now? Like and I'm ready, you know? And so for me, it's just what was something that was given to me and that I do, but because I've been doing it for so long, my system knows what to do when I do it. So I do a little bit of a countdown. It looks like an old movie screen, and I count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I walk through a path in the trees, and I open up to this maybe it's an astral space kind of that I go to. Um, it's a very beautiful place that I walk into. There's lots of beings that hang out there, but there's a chaise lounge. Oh, the other thing that I do is I visualize walking up a stairs. This is all visual in my mind's eye, and I light a candle. So when the candle is on, I'm available for messages. And not to say that I'm not getting messages or syncs, but like to really practice doing it or to engage with doing it, like because we're humans, right? I'm living like a human life. And so I have kind of these distractions, but when I'm walking up my stairs, I light my candle, I can kind of do my countdown and I walk through my trees and I walk into and I sit on my chaise lounge. And when I sit there, we'll see. Like I see what happens, right? I might get met there by past loved ones. Sometimes it's other messages. And then, I might like start to write stuff down from after that. My whole point in saying that is I've been doing that kind of same thing that I feel works for me. And of course I love to try other things too, but so it's like it's just kind of like that memory where now I can drop in very quickly. I can drop in it just really quick, but I practice doing it slowly and not, for a long time. But now I just have all this kind of data about that. And so um Mumble Fairy, like when you said something about, like when you were talking about like, is that a way that I should kind of, I forget the exact words that you said, but it's like if that feels like connected for you, then kind of try it. And like do it, keep doing it. And then it just, I suppose it becomes like sort of a language that you develop with them. But they're always talking to you. It's funny, like I saw somebody said something like, I feel like I'm not connecting with my guides, but then I'm getting all these numbers. I'm getting all these synchronicities with numbers. And I'm like, well, what do you think that is? It's like, so sometimes it's expecting it to look a certain way. And when it doesn't look exactly that way we expect, we maybe don't recognize it. And like I resonated a lot with what Ezra was saying. Um, it's like deconstructing everything that we were taught it's supposed to look like this is how you do things. Like I just file all those things under fake rules. Like so when something's presented to me of like maybe I'm putting pressure on myself and I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself at work right now. And I'm like, is this a fake? I just ask myself, is this a fake rule? And usually like it is. And then I'm just like, well, what way do you want to engage? Like my only rule is to try to not be an asshole, like to try to be kind. There's some maybe like moral things that I kind of want to stick to in terms of that. And it's like really important for me to use discernment. And I just say all of that only because that for me, I feel like is a great like starting place to then trust yourself when you get messages and it just may not be the way you expect because some way along the line someone told you it was supposed to look a certain way, but you know you the best. You are the best sorts of information of how it's going to work for you. And we've kind of been told to look outside. Some of us have been taught and told, and it may even be just in there so deep to look outside ourselves for answers. That's all. Thank you very much. I went on a long time. Carolyn.
It's funny because I came in to say something completely different, and then you said something about language. And I remembered that I signed up for an online class that was trying to teach us how to kind of basically write your own dictionary on how your guides, how spirits communicate with you by looking back on things like, for example, I was in a car accident way back before seatbelts were even a law. And I was riding in a hatchback and I kept getting this poke that, this really isn't safe. And maybe I should put my seatbelt on. So I climbed into the seat, put my seatbelt on, had everybody else put the seatbelt on, and 5 minutes later we were in a car accident. So that's one of the ways and it was kind of a conversation. So I had to kind of discern, is that clear cognizance? Is that clear audience? Whatever. But just writing things down. And Jen Marie is always saying, what were you thinking about when that happened? That's another way to kind of develop the language. I had come in to say one of the problems I had when I first started with Bright and Dark with the syncs was that everybody had specific syncs and they were all different. So I thought I wasn't allowed to have any of the same syncs. And it's not true. I still have to tell myself, so like I'll see something, I was driving to an event and all the way to the event, I kept seeing like 999 on my speedometer. And then, oh, I saw like 777. I was like, oh, cool. And then I looked down, the next time I looked down, it was 888, as in 88 miles, 88.8 miles. And then I got to 999. I got to 1111. And I was like, oh, this is really cool, And I would really have to think about what I would actually, I don't know what it was. I don't remember what it was, but I actually figured out what it was trying to tell me. But yeah, okay, I'm usually not a numbers person. Feathers will make me think of wet all the time. But yeah, anyway, write it down if that's what it takes. I have a notebook dedicated now that I'm starting to write down. Okay, this is because I also do a lot of clairmotive, or which is also under clairsentience, I think. I will feel a certain way when they are talking to me. So that's how I know that they're talking to me. Like Maria goes to a pretty place. I've now built a room that's a lot like a great big library with a big window and comfy chairs and a tea set and candles. Sometimes I meet them there. Sometimes I meet them in a meadow. That's all I had to say. Maria or
Thank you. Yes. I just wanted to add one quick thing that happened to me today. So I was supposed to be at a birthday brunch at what I thought was 11:30, but it was 10:30. And I swore when I looked at the text message last night that it said 11:30. Okay, it did not. It said 10:30. And what happened was my grandfather butt dialed me at 4:47 a.m. this morning, and I was completely startled and led to me calling my aunt at the time I was supposed to leave to get there at 10:30. And she was like, oh, like, we're just getting going to be there for 10:30. And I was like, isn't it 11:30? And then I looked at the text. I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's 10:30. And so like I could have been completely like stressed about the situation, but I was just like, okay, like thank you, Papa Joe, for butt dialing me at 4:47. Because if you didn't, I would have never called my aunt and she would have never given me the correct time. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm supposed to arrive at 11 instead of the time. Like, and if there's a reason for that, if I was being maybe protected from an accident or on the road or whatever reason it was, I got a parking spot right out front, right when I arrived. So it's like, there's some times that I might not know, but I chose to kind of be grateful that I was able to get there safely and that those things happened. And some people may just say like that's just what happened, but I'm like, like I was experiencing gratitude for those things happening when in the past I may have experienced maybe a lot of stress. But to me, like that is an engagement with like my team because that was like a lot of orchestration that happened for me to be able to realize that I actually had the wrong time. So like that's kind of what I mean. Like that was kind of just an example of like things that maybe I could choose to just believe, oh, like that's just what happened today. But I felt like maybe there was a greater thing going on. Um, Yes, thank you. And I love getting feathers, and with the sinks, when like if y'all share sinks, um and you start seeing them, like to me, like even though I think of wit when I see feathers, but it's a sink for connection. It's just like a reminder that we're all connected. So I love getting when y'all share sinks and then I see them, it reminds me of you. And then I just instantly like feel like that connectedness. And that's it, Maya.
Yeah, so I kind of just want to touch on in my practice, I'm still learning how to connect with my guides and how like the different frequencies work. And I've been practicing for about 4 years and it's been different throughout my practice, where in the beginning it was very audible and very dramatic in the beginning, and now in there's times where it's like dead silence and then it'll come back and but it may be different. Like this time I had kind of taken my practice back a little bit and stepped away from my practice a bit through health issues, and my guides I see more as my ancestors. And my ancestors were like, no, you need to know that we're still here for you, that just because you're stepping away doesn't mean we're not here and we're not helping you through your journey. And more I'm used to the audible or sometimes visual things, and I started getting synchronicities of numbers or patterns of different things and then seeing them every single day. And I was like, okay, I get it. And normally whenever I see some type of symbol that I'm not sure, but I kind of have like a little feeling of that's something that I need to pay attention to, I'm like, show me in threes. I need to know if it's me because I don't trust myself yet, or if I'm just making this up. So I'm like, show me in threes, and I'll know for sure if it's something to pay attention to if it's in threes. And that's just by me constantly getting that kind of affirmation, show me in threes, show me in threes, show me in threes. And that's just kind of how it works for me. I don't know. But mumble fairy.
Wow, this is all, I love this conversation so much. I really appreciate everyone's feedback. I really like, what Maria and Caroline were saying about like how they are connecting, engaging. I really like what Whit said about how like sometimes you're just going to be really, um, like you're not going to feel it at all. And I think maybe I came in really hot there a few months ago and I was like really feeling things. And then recently I was like less so, but I'm still engaging and still kind of like trying to maintain a practice. But then you kind of mentioned like I don't get synchronicities with numbers. I know a lot of people do, and I think that's really cool, but I don't. But I think what I may have been taking for granted, possibly my entire life, is my intuition. I think I've always said, "Oh, I have a great intuition." That's just there's just things that have happened that had just really were very timely, and perhaps that has actually been my team all along, and me just not recognizing or understanding that. There's been times when I listened to my intuition and I got out of a really bad situation and I was very lucky. Or like one time I was driving on the highway late at night in the left-hand side of the lane, and I just had this really strong feeling like I need to get over right now. And as soon as I got over, a car passed me in the lane that I had been in. They were driving the wrong side of a split highway. And then there's been other time where I was driving and I was like, I really need to pull over and check the water in my car. And I didn't because I really just wanted to keep going. And then my engine exploded. And I really should have pulled over. So not that I was hurt, but just that, I should have trusted that moment. And so yeah, this is like a very big light bulb moment for me right now. So thank you all. That's all extremely helpful. Thank you. Oh,
I just
Maria.
wanted to thank you. I with this conversation, um sometimes I get to like really excited about like talking about it, and I love being in the realm of like the mysterious and like kind of the what we call like the hidden mysteries or whatever. But that kind of realm, the psychic whatever. I love being there. I love talking about it. But I feel like I just want to be mindful to also talk about something that I feel, that is important and that I feel strongly about it is that Earth School is hard. Like we all are kind of going through these experiences, and we're on Earth, and things are not linear. Like I was just having a conversation with a friend, like she was like, I was doing, she was saying I was doing so good, whatever, good for her means. I was doing so good, and then, last night I was out and I got anxious and I had to leave. And I said, it sounds like you did a great job of like supporting your body and going home and resting, but thinking like, oh, like with my mental health, I'm doing like whatever the situation is. In this particular case was like, I'm doing so good, but it's like not necessarily linear, right? Like it ebbs and flows. And just like we're talking, like what y'all said, like your signs and your sinks, like, it kind of ebbed and flows. And like, that is perfect, right? Like that it's not linear, it ebbs and flows. And if something is calling your attention, like your focus is something supporting your body or supporting, or family is going through something, or we're going through a crisis or a huge catalyst, like I'm not always going to go to my forest on my chaise lounge when I'm like in a crisis. I'm going to engage differently, where that to me is more just about like paying attention to my nervous system, feeling like how I'm engaged, feeling when I'm feeling that adrenaline, and I'm going to engage differently. And it's not like my guides aren't going anywhere. They're right along there with me, but it's just where like kind of my focus is, it feels like, and wherever your starting place is exactly where it is. And the best place to start is exactly where you are, right? Like where we're feeling, sometimes we feel like, oh, like I'm maybe missed out on time because I'm just starting like my practice now, or whatever the case may be. But just the best place to start is exactly where you are, like in this time, and time is just a construct, right? That's another like fake rule that we kind of made up, right? And so I just wanted to like acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with you, um, that you like this is happening for you now, and because we are like, connected, like this conversation is like happening and it's like divine timing because you're supposed to be here, hearing this. And if like, then this kind of creates a new way to engage or just has you maybe thinking about things differently. But it just felt important to say that, like that we are here on earth, like having this human experience. And so we are going to go through these human things that happen. And so the ancestor thing I love too. And I was just recently kind of leaning into thinking about like how I experienced two connections with ancestors. And um, like even a thought, even just the thought of thinking about someone is like a way of connection, you know, and kinding to, sometimes I may think of a loved one and I may feel sadness. Um, and sometimes, I may think of a loved one and just really feel that like connectedness. And that is like a sign, that is a sync. Um, that comes up. Renee.
Okay, here I am. Sorry again on my phone. Um, I'll even join for now. One thing I was going to mention also is I don't know if this happens with anyone else, but when kind of the idea of like the dead zones comes up where you have like the lulls in activity, I have noticed it's hormonally related and so is the hyperactivity. So I didn't know if anyone else has experienced that, but I just wanted to
throw that out there just in case people are writing stuff down and tracking it, because I've been doing that a lot more lately. But I mean, I can definitely tell, like, at certain times, like, I know things are going to get wild and I know things are going to get stupid boring, where, you know, like Maria was talking about, like our kind of inner sanctuaries where I can't even get in there, like during the dead zones. It's just super boring. But yeah, that's just another little weird witchy thing, I think. So okay, I'm gonna hop off.
You mean that we're like connected to nature and our bodies and our hormones and it is.
I can't say I've ever noticed that because I didn't start my witchcraft until after menopause.
I'm just going to put a question out there because it came up because of that. So, why did everybody start their witchcraft practice? Does anybody want to share? Go ahead, Carolyn.
I was waiting for this to come up for my hand because whenever I have the chat up, I have to raise my hand to raise my hand. It won't let me raise my hand any other way. Sorry. No, I was actually getting syncs about witchcraft. First of all, through my daughter, I met some real witches, and started asking them some questions, and then somebody talked about how their mother was a kitchen witch, and then my daughter told me she was a pagan, and then I told somebody once that when I was little, I wanted to have long gray hair, the same color my hair is now, but I wanted it long and a braid down my back, and I wanted to wear really long skirts and like loose hippie clothes. And they said, so basically you wanted to be a witch. And it just started snowballing from there. And the next thing I know, I'm on TikTok because people in my D&D group kept sending me TikToks, and I got tired of, having to go to the internet it was just much easier to go through the app. And kids at school, when I was working in the high school, were showing me TikToks. And so I went ahead and got the app, and the app, without anything from me, brought me straight to Witch Talk, where I found Jen Marie, and that's where it started. So that's me. Go ahead, Mumbleberry.
Okay, technology. For me, when I was in high school, I had friends that were pagan and Wiccan, but I was still in a Christian religion. And when I stepped away from that religion, I think I just felt like, in a way, I was stepping away from any kind of organized anything, like anything that felt like it was trying to tell me what to do or how to be spiritual or anything like that, that I needed to completely separate myself from. And I still, like prayed, but I just didn't quite feel connected to it. It became a lot like, I don't know if you're there. I don't know if you're listening, but I feel comforted when I talk to something outside of myself. So I'm going to keep doing this. And then several years ago, I just saw someone randomly mention, like, if you're praying to Heavenly Father, why don't you pray to Heavenly Mother? And in the particular religion in which I was raised, you didn't pray to a Heavenly Mother, but there was kind of this underground in the Relief Society kind of thought that there is a Heavenly Mother. We just don't talk about her. Like a real, we don't talk about Bruno's situation. So I started praying to both Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother. And anyway, so a lot of my own like personal homegrown spiritual kind of feelings and connectedness kind of started building around, praying to Heavenly Mother, and just kind of building my own form of spirituality and sense of spirit. And so when I made a friend a few years ago, I kind of mentioned to her how I approach spirituality, and she was like, "Oh, so you're a witch?" And I was like, "Well, if I'm a witch, I'm like the laziest witch. Like I'm not. I don't do a specific craft. I don't do a specific practice. I do like candles and meditations. And I believe there's something bigger outside of myself. I just don't know what it is. You know." And then she started sending me random, just funny TikTok videos until it got to the point where, very much like Carolyn, I was like, well, I might as well just sign up for this app. There's no such thing as privacy, whatever. I'm just going to join it. And then immediately witch talk. And I was like, and I just started to feel really connected to that. And I had already, and I had already kind of gone down this like counseling rabbit hole. And then I started really connecting with this idea of shadow work, and I started doing that. And then I kept seeing Jen Marie's videos, bright and dark. And I was like, I am not ready to do this path yet. But then it wasn't just her videos. I just started feeling this overwhelming sense like I needed to explore this side of myself again, that it was kind of a side of myself that I'd kind of abandoned at some point. Yeah, I really felt connected to the wind when I was a teenager. And at one point, I just felt like I wasn't anymore. And it was almost like this grieving process. And so recently, through trying to reconnect with the elements, I've sort of reconnected to the wind, I guess is the best way I can describe it. And so just starting to explore those connections. I think, when I became a mom 6 years ago, I think that also had was the beginning of it too, because I was connecting more to Mother Earth through meditation and really starting to assign this prayer not to a Heavenly Mother, but to a motherly entity. And through this work, I kind of came to understand that though I'm not necessarily into entity work, when I'm praying to something, it is Mother Earth or the Mother Made Crone many persona versions of that persona. And that was a lot. So I can't tell who was next. I think it might have been Ocean.
Yes,
Okay.
you're absolutely right. You're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Mumble Fairy. Um, I've uncovered kind of a new facet that I wanted to share about my origin story, because I know a lot of you have already kind of heard bits and pieces sewn together in a non-chronological order. um, Sorry, my brain was like wanting to go on with the metaphor. I was like, don't, don't, because it's fun, but it's not relevant. Anyway, so my um I grew up Christian, like almost like Baptist Christian, like pretty redneck Christianity, I guess is the best way I can describe it, but like modernized in a weird way. Um and I remember just being so obsessed with the idea that there was somebody who wanted me to have everything I ever wanted, because that's what I thought of God as like a little kid. Because they told me like pray to God and he'll give you whatever you want, because consumerism and Christianity are like hand in hand at this point. And I just remember asking for the most ridiculous things and like hoping and praying and like that they would show up and stuff. And um I also really latched onto witchcraft really early, um because of like TV shows, um especially because there was like what's it called? Halloween Town. I don't know why I forgot that. And the other one with the three witches at the same time kind of was like a really huge thing that I can't remember. It's gonna come back to me.
Charmed.
What?
Charmed.
No. I did like Charmed, but I wasn't allowed to watch that because it was technically an adult show. I was very heavily censored. It was like the one with the Sanderson sisters, and I know you guys are all gonna like know that. Um, anyway, so but those came out at the same time, and yes, Hocus Pocus, holy shit, thank you. Oh my god, my brain is just so grateful. That felt like a hug. Like, thank you. um, the relief. um, anyway, so those all kind of came out, and I remember really latching on to the witch from the first one from Halloween Town, like the grandmother. And the phrase that she always said was, um, magic is simple. All you have to do is know what you want and then let yourself have it. And like I always just, really latched onto that. And because of the consumerism mixed with Christianity, funny enough. And so as I got older, I had a lot of more disdain for the patriarchy involved in Christianity, and I started to, especially as I understood that I was queer, it became a more hateful environment that just I could like no matter what it felt like I was going to be alienated, like no matter how good or bad I acted. So I kind of stopped being that like devout, believing sort of person and was like, well, I'm never going to be accepted no matter what I do because of who I am. And so that kind of led me to be a bit of an atheist for a while. And then I started to get into agnosticism because I'm a Pisces. I'm inherently spiritual. I can't not interact with things that I don't understand. It's way too interesting. Uh, and so I remember as an agnostic, what I started to do was just be really curious. Like I was almost at that point kind of an omnist, but not really. Um, sorry, I need a drink of water for a sec. Thank you for holding space. And so I started going with my friends to their religions. Like my friends would be like, "Do you want to come to church with me?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, why not?" And it felt like I got to experience, like, dip my toe into like different communities and different ways of seeing things. And I mean, most of it was organized religion, but I also ended up having friends growing up whose moms were into Reiki and were, witches and stuff. And or probably, I don't know if they identified that way, but we all know when we meet a witch. Uh, and so that sort of openness led me to be able to kind of have some more freedom to um, kind of interact spiritually with my life. But what really pushed me into witchcraft was having a chronic disability, was being chronically in pain and having chronic fatigue and chronic nausea and just debilitating physical pain from fibromyalgia. And like after being a person who was a volunteer at a horse rescue and worked there, for like 8 to 10 hours a day, and then going to like being in bed all the time and never going out anywhere, it was like such a hard transition. Uh, and so I started trying to, because modern medicine couldn't help me. All of my issues were so physiological that every time I went to the doctor, it was always, I don't know, just take this pill. And the pills would mess with the way that I experienced my system. So I had even further, it created further separation from me understanding myself. Um, and so my way of trying to like usually when you get that like burst of energy and you're like, okay, I'm going to go at it again. Like for me, that was usually like, okay, I'm going to make another appointment. But I shifted that to, okay, I'm going to try a class or a book or something. And I ended up taking a class on Reiki. Um, I tried to sign up with this woman like over like messages, and she called me and we had like a 4 hour conversation where I was just crying, and she was like one of my first mentors that like was like an intentional mentor. I definitely had like mentors before that, but I remember the feeling of like as soon as I started learning Reiki, the feeling of, oh, I can interact with my system. Like I can actually interact with my own body, like energetically. I don't have to outsource my healing was like so empowering to learn for me. Um, and then from there, I I ended up on TikTok pretty much like everybody else. And I saw Jen Marie, and she was talking about shadow work, and I was like, what's that? And she was the only witch that had really made sense to me, because every other witch that I had come across on Witch Talk, it felt gimmicky, and that didn't draw me in. It just like it was nostalgic, like those witch movies from when I was a kid, but it didn't actually feel empowering. But something about what Jen Marie was talking about, it really like clicked in with my like psych brain, because I've been in therapy since I was like maybe like 14 or 15. And I got so good at therapy that my therapists would just kind of hang out with me, and I was like, no, I need therapy, but I just got really good at it. And so I needed that shadow work component to be able to propel me further, into or empower me further, I would say, actually. And the first thing that I did actually before I even signed up for Foundations program was I got a private session with Jen Marie, because I was like, I'm not signing up for some fucking cult, because I actually have like a special interest weirdly in cults, but that kind of helps me avoid them for the most part. Trauma makes you susceptible to cults inherently, and I just feel like there's not a lot of compassion for that aspect. People think like lowly of people who like get caught, but it's like there are so many factors of getting caught up in that stuff, and it is way worth having compassion for yourself. But that's a whole nother subject. Anyway, so I wanted to meet up with Jen Marie, and she's like, I didn't even have any witchcraft questions. I was just like, hi, like, what are you about? And she started telling me about the Foundations program, and I was like, oh, well, I have ADHD and I'm autistic, and does that mean I can't be a witch? And I remember her telling me that she was also ADHD, and it is specifically what like made her feel uh I don't this isn't a direct quote obviously, but like she's saying that that's what made her feel like a witch too, essentially. um and so and then entering the program, I know I need to stop at the origin story, but I just want to say this one last part. I promise I'll pass it off. My like coming into the program was the first time I had ever experienced community, and I'm really grateful for the chance to express my authenticity here. And I love you guys. Now I'm going to pass it off to Miss Renee.
Oh, there, I unmuted myself. Okay. Well, I got called a witch on the playground when I was in elementary school, and there were some people that were genuinely afraid of me. This isn't a rumor I started. I look back on it, and I did like one of my friends reminded me of this recently, but I used to have like just giant pockets, and they were just stuffed full of little amulets and treasures and lots of little plastic like animal figures. And I didn't take them out and show them to anyone or play with them. I just carried them around with me everywhere. But there was a group of like very Catholic schoolgirls. I didn't go to a religious school, but they happened to be, and like they were like afraid of me, and they labeled me a witch. And um so, and I always had friends, like I wasn't like I was like completely isolated or anything. But so that it happened to me like so young that I think by the time I was like a teenager, I just leaned into it. I was just over it. But I didn't really, I mean, I've always read a lot and everything, but then again, when you get into like the adult world and like working in an office, and I worked in an office, and I'm sure this happens with other people, but there's some people when you get around them, there's like a connection whether you want it or not. And there was this one kind of older man that I worked with, and for some reason I could just pick stuff out of his head. And like he would be thinking of a song and I would start singing or something. Like it happened so much. And this guy got really afraid of me as well and would tell me I was a witch. So like until kind of joining this group, I mean, and I've always had my own ideas about it too, but just my social interactions with people regarding any kind of witchiness until I fully have embraced it recently have not been good. You know, so that's my origin story. But yeah, I was gonna just real quick, Ocean was talking about cults. There's a really good book that just came out this year called Cultish, the Language of Cults. And it's not about cults, but it's about the language that's used to indoctrinate people into cults. And right now, like two of the biggest cults are like Soul Cycle and Lululemon, which you wouldn't necessarily think are cults, but if you read this book, um, and you just kind of know that cults use very exclusive language. I mean, they just have a whole way of indoctrinating people. But so now cults have moved into the consumer quadrant. It's pretty interesting. But anyway, I'm gonna hop off and mute myself. Oh, and I think Ezra is up next. Oops.
Whatchamacallit, let's see. For the origin thing, I was thinking about actually tulpas again. That's what kind of came up for me, is because that's something that I've been like, it's really cool to have a word to that. And when I looked it up, they were calling it thought form as well. And I was thinking about for how long I have been doing magic without realizing that I'm doing magic. And I remember like thought form and tulpas, like it even goes to like sigils for me. It's kind of like building a structure for something by giving it a name or an object or a symbol, and then that thought or frequency or phrase or feeling signature can now like pour into it. Like you created the vessel, and now the energy can exist in there. And I was reminded of when I was like 5 years old. I'd heard of imaginary friends, and I was like, I don't have one of those, so I'm just gonna make one. And so I did that, and I like played with my imaginary like sibling, and for ages. And I was just like, I'll just have conversations with with her, and like and so I've done, like, even as a writer, like creating characters, and or kind of like taking an existing character and putting my own spin on it as a method to give those thoughts a voice, and a language. Like that's something I've been doing like my entire life. And my origin story kind of goes back to also my chronic illness. And I realized, like, at some point, I did this like online program that that got me thinking more spiritually. Like they would use quotes from like Alan Watts and Ram Dass. And I was like, I'm a quote person. And so I would go look them up and then I would read more of their quotes and then like find like snippets of their books and stuff like that or in clips. And so I started thinking more in that way after a long time of being atheist or agnostic because of my own religious trauma that was actually Jewish. And I was raised in the South, so I also have some like Christian trauma, even though I wasn't like raised Christian. But then at some point, as I decided I wanted to be a doctor, which I realize now was more like a feeling that I wanted to heal. And but what was really cool about, that like foray into like, I'm going to, go back to school. I'm going to go to medical school. I started like doing a lot of research because I'm a research person. And the more I learned over like 2 years or so about science, the more I was realizing that it was magic and it was becoming more and more just bewildering that it wasn't being called that. And I started with things like moon water and, and just learning more about astrology and that kind of thing. And then, of course, as I did that, I started seeing it more and more on TikTok. And then I eventually just like took the leap and talked to Jen Marie. And it felt like everything just kind of fell into place after that. Like once I allowed myself to believe magic was real, it just was. And so, and now I just couldn't imagine it being any other way. And it like, like I see people all over that live like unmagically, and they it feels like that very belief contribute like that nothing is magic and that we're just like floating on a rock in space for no reason and there's nothing like that leads to a lot of like misery. And I think that that's like a resistance that I had to overcome, like very like it was a very active process of shadow work that I had to do to overcome that, because I was like full science bro atheist for a long time. And I feel like the rubber band snapped back in the other direction. And now I can't shut up about magic. And I'm just like, it's just, that's that when we were talking about like a few months ago, like, what would you do if you could do anything, without any limits? I was just like, I would just do magic all the time. I would be like a professional witch. I would just be open about it. I would like teach it to other people. I would like, yeah, I would just surround myself in it because those were the books I read. And other than science fiction, but it's basically the same thing since science is magic. But yeah, not sure who's next.
I don't know. Is it me? I can't
Renee,
tell.
do you still have your hand up? I feel like that's probably a no. Go ahead,
No,
Maria.
no, sorry. Yeah, let me get it down.
No.
Sorry.
No worries. I just wanted to make sure. Go ahead, Maria.
Thanks. I put myself back on mute. Sorry, I thought that was so funny. Um, so maybe I should just pass it off now. I yeah, so sorry, it's like so funny like when I start to talk and it's just like then all the information and my brain works so much faster than I can like get it out, and it happens like every time and it's just funny. I wanted to say um
You're gonna be okay, buddy.
oh sorry. Oh Renee, you're not on mute. Sorry. Oh, there you are. I think you're talking to your cute little dog too. Um so I have two things. One is the origin story. Well, It's so funny because when you ask that question, I was gonna say like all these things that I've experienced or that I've done, but when I really felt into it more, it feels true that I've always been a witch or engaged with the universe in a way that we describe as witchiness, the whatever all those kind of categories that we say are witchiness. And there was a time in my life that I was searching and like divination practices kind of called to me tarot and things. And that's when I really started to explore the idea of witchcraft. But what was presented to me at that time was Wicca. And there was stuff about Wicca that didn't resonate with me. And I honestly did not know that like there were other types of witchcrafts. And so I was just like, I do these things, but not these things. So whatever that makes me, whatever. Um, and then just a very like I had a lot of there was some similarities to what Ocean said in my journey and to what Ezra said as well. And how I arrived at Bright and Dark was I don't know why I downloaded the TikTok app. I really I can't recall like not I'm like I just downloaded the TikTok app and Jemarie popped up and I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And then same thing, had a private session with her like the day before Foundations launched, I think, and then came to the first meeting and I was like, oh, this is being a witch. Yeah, I'm that. Okay, great. Like, and so, but it feels like just like that kind of connection. I don't know. It feels like I've always been that way, but I always haven't called myself that. And so that feels right. The one thing I just wanted to say, bye, Jean Marie. Is Ocean the oh,